Joining me now, Marco Vicenzino, International Affairs Analyst. Hello, thank you very much indeed for your time. First of all, to what degree has this pandemic increased tensions worldwide?
I think it's accelerated them enormously. Obviously, the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic it marks the beginning of a new era. And with the beginning of that new era, we see China that's been getting very aggressive worldwide. It's not that it started from scratch, these things existed, but when I see it's accelerated to the point where it's cracked down at home. If you look at places like Hong Kong, in the broader region, in places like the South China Sea, with Malaysia, Vietnam, and Indonesia, tensions rising on its border with India. And then it's an aggressive diplomacy in different parts of the world. Anyone who's criticizing, the virus emanated from China, and many people are questioning China about it. Anyone who's questioned it has come under Chinese diplomatic pressure and economic pressure. For example, Australia raised the issue of, where did COVID come from? And it's pushing for that at the World Health Organization, whereby at the annual meeting, there was an overwhelming response calling for such an investigation. Finally, China accepted it in principle, but afterwards placed punitive damages on Australia for pushing this issue. So the point I'm trying to make basically is that we've seen that as the new COVID era or the post-COVID era begins, we see a more aggressive China. That's major concern for security worldwide.
And is that partly because the US hasn't taken the lead in this crisis? I mean, it's not really the Trump administration's style, it has to be said. How much damage is this crisis doing to America's standing in the world?
The way the Trump administration's foreign policy has not changed much since he assumed office. Now, when you see this, the idea was to be is if the world expects America to take the lead on this, that hasn't happened, and it's not likely to happen anytime soon. This is a type of crisis different from other ones, whereby even if you, for example, you look at the European Union, when the outbreak took place, everyone would have expected European solidarity, but each country fared for themselves, because it was such an immediate existential crisis that, for example, people needing the equipment. So you had a competition worldwide of trying to get equipment, each one and under an existential threat trying to protect its own. Now, as time goes by, there's been a growing, internationally, there's been a growing understanding of the disease, and we see more of an effort internationally, slowly. Maybe it should be where it should be, but there is a greater degree of cooperation on trying to resolve the issue, whether it's treatments, vaccines. So I think overall on the medical front, I've seen there's been more progress, but on the diplomatic front, it's been the absolute opposite. We're going to see growing concerns, and it's not just the U.S.-China rift. We're looking at more countries individually, growing powers and rising powers at the regional level, pursuing their own interests in a much bolder way, and these interests often conflict. So in the new post-COVID world, in this new emerging world order, we're going to see a lot more fragmentation. Once again, the U.S. and China being at the forefront, but other powers pursuing their own national interests, which often conflict, as I stated.
And do you think we'll see any changes when it comes to the G7? Like I mentioned before, it's not going to be held this month, but it's been postponed. And Donald Trump wants Russia to be back at the table. What do you make of that?
Listen, what the idea is with the G7 is to use it as a forum for other powers who are concerned, not just with China, but also looking to work more on a multilateral level. Different forums seem not to be working, so they want to try to use the G7. Now, Russia, it'll be very difficult for Russia to participate because you're going to have the European powers probably more than likely opposing it. But if you're talking about countries like India, democratic countries like India, democratic countries like Australia, they will more than likely be invited to the table as democratic nations coming together. Once again, it's not an anti-China coalition, but there's growing concern about Chinese expansionism, particularly post-COVID in a more aggressive way. But the Russia issue, that's going to be subject to debate. Once again, you have on the one side, you have the U.S. and the Trump administration. On the other side, you have the Europeans who take a different view of it, particularly Germany.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for your time and for your analysis. Marco Vicenzino joining us there from the US.